We actually put people through a real-time and say, I'm going to choose a backup restore. I'm going to choose a restore point. And invariably, of course, that restore point's dirty, only to see it reinfected within seconds later drills that point home.
Most people just believe that, hey, I have a backup that is offsite. I should be fine in case I was impacted by ransomware.
Dangerous would be probably almost an understatement. It's an all caps directive.
It's another term that kind of floats the internet is the whole minutes to meltdown. What is that about then?
It is amazing when you ask those folks to play those roles and say, do you know what your job is? Oh, whoops, the CISO's out on a cruise and not available. Who's that backup?
Do you feel boards should have a ransomware tabletop exercise as well?
Can you imagine a supply chain? A bad actor doesn't even have to go and worry about all of these diversified things that they used to. If they're smart enough to figure out you have a monolithic model, they can exfiltrate that and query it. They're like, this job is so easy.
Ransomware. Every time people hear this word, they always think, I've got my backup, I should be fine. Now, this is probably far from reality in today's complex world where we have on-premise, cloud, containers, now AI as well. So the definition of resiliency has changed quite a bit. I had Chris from Commvault and he spoke about some of the changes that he's noticing with the customers he's talking to in terms of how they approach resiliency, what changes required, what are some of the challenges, especially in a world where cybersecurity insurances do not want you to pay ransomware. You have governments who are coming up with policies that makes it illegal for you to pay ransomware. What does resiliency look like in this particular world, and how would you use that to build a strong foundation for a security strategy that at least has a minimum viable resiliency in your architecture? All that and a lot more in this conversation with Chris from Commvault. If this is your second or third time enjoying an episode of Cloud Security Podcast, definitely give us a follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching this on, whether it's Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or LinkedIn. I really appreciate the support in the work we do, and I look forward to talking to you more. Enjoy this episode with Chris, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace. Hello and welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast. I've got Christopher with me. Hey man, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. Ashish, thank you for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation because we haven't covered this topic, at least in detail so far. So maybe to kick it off, can you tell us a bit about yourself and where you are in your professional background?
Sure. Yeah, a little background about me. I've been in the industry in IT for about 30 years. I kind of grew up first at a couple of large companies in the engineering space, and then realized sales and pre-sales was the real magical area I wanted to spend my time in, and was lucky enough to be in the global reseller community for, well, almost 25 years, and ran sales, pre-sales, post-sales, and spent most of my time over the last decade really being a chief technology officer for a global system integrator. So a lot of opportunity to sit with customer executives almost 4 or 5 days a week, hearing the good, the middle, and all things that need to be improved, and love that, especially hearing that client feedback and helping work on opportunities. So that's just a quick about me.
And thank you for setting that up as well. I think the topic that I had in mind for our conversation, it's top of mind for a lot of people. Ransomware is a big thing. A lot of times people talk about the backups, and most times you hear that, hey, that won't happen to me because we have backups, so we're covered. Right. And usually, and I think you and I were talking about this earlier, and how that could be a dangerous assumption by a lot of people. Could you share a bit about why in today's world is that a dangerous assumption to be made by people?
Yeah. Dangerous would be probably almost an understatement. It's an all caps directive. Just as dangerous as assuming there would never have been a Spinal Tap 2 40 years later. Okay, just to keep this really relevant. And I'm so excited. I just had to say it. You wield back the wheels of time and you think about, hey, I have backups. I feel confident. It didn't matter if you were on tape or back in the day at the bleeding edge of disk. Clearly, for quite a while now, that is not good enough. I mean, you can have all the backups in the world, right? Let's talk about a couple of challenges. One, doesn't really matter if you have an operationalized executing the restore. I'll make a quick comment there because we're clearly well past this point. But there are those enterprises, Ashish, that you still have conversations and you ask, how often do you test your resiliency? And you'll either get back kind of heads dip because they're looking somewhere for an answer and they really don't have it from a time perspective. Or they're like, well, we work with Iron Mountain, or we work with Deloitte, or we work with the reseller of our choice. And they tell us to do it twice a year, but We don't have the time for that. And that was a difficult answer to get behind a decade ago. Today, it's just not even in the 3D space of acceptable. It's nowhere in the quadrant, right? You cannot not permit the double negative, test your resilience. And it's not just about the backups, of course, to your question. It's about, do I have isolated and copies that are immutable? And if I don't have immutable copies, then I could just be in a mode where I will be perpetually restoring anomalies. And of course, we know where that gets folks, that the frustration wheel, hamster wheel, if you will, spins till it almost pops off the bearings. So you have to have the right type of copies, and you have to do the testing at some appropriate regimen. Look, if you can't do it twice a year, then figure out a way to do it once a year. But, I'll just stop there. I could go on a whole rant, but, I
No, I was
haven't
gonna say,
taken all of my medication this morning.
no, I was gonna say, why do you feel there's a barrier? Because I mean, obviously backups have worked for a long time. A lot of
Yeah.
people have relied on them for a long time. And why, or is there something missing in the traditional way that we have always backed up? Because I mean, I'm even thinking about the fact that these days we just don't have data centers. We have data centers, cloud, and throw some AI data in there as well if you
Yeah.
want to. So is that because things have changed, or what's different? I mean, why is the traditional backup not enough?
Yeah, I mean, there's just too much acceleration of technology, as we all know. I mean, we can't even, look, you do this for a profession. I've watched a number of your podcasts. They're incredible, by the way. You have a incredible mix of people on week to week. And then you just look at the variety of telemetry coming, both positive and challenging, right? Coming at today's IT leaders. It's just pure speed that's occurring today, and all tech is causing this challenge. And I would say that, if you look at standard backups, or even when people thought, wow, I've got this nailed, I can back up, I can restore specific things, that probably works well for most enterprises. And frankly, most enterprises have automated the ability to recover small bits here and there for an end user. But that's not what we're worried about anymore. We're worried about complete enterprise shutdown, and not to rattle the saber, but right. I mean, we're talking about our entire enterprise being held hostage, not Sam or John, Susan's or John's 3 files or 2 directories that need restored. And if we're not prepared and having the conversation from the bottom up through the top of the chain, that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I know everybody says that, but I don't feel everybody takes it to heart, Ashish. I think that's part of the challenge. They just don't actually ingratiate that term, look at it in the tough way you have to, allocate the expense, and more importantly, allocate the rigor that you need to be able to be ready. So,
do you have some numbers on how long does it? Because I mean, I guess there is some numbers that float around in terms of if you leave a username password on the internet, I don't know, less than half an hour, and people have already tried at least multiple people on the internet have tried your username password. What's the is there some numbers that you have for these kind of impact windows for something like a ransomware or similar? Why backup is important?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Like, how long is this happening? What's the dwell time? We hear this term, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stats. Let's talk about dwell time for a minute. The nefarious actor gets in there deep, hunkers in to the old cave, doesn't come out because they're just sitting in your enterprise. I mean, some studies show there's an average of 14, 15 days. We have other studies. Of course, you could whip out a ton of studies. You pick your analyst group, if you will. It could be as high as a couple hundred days. You can debate the number of days in dwell time, whether it's an exposed password, to your point, whether it's inflicting pain upon some particular firewall, or whatever could be the weak point at that particular enterprise, or an API that's exposed. I mean, go down the entire list. The point is, whether it's 14 days or whether it's 200 days, it's going to happen. Frankly, it's a little scarier when it's longer, triple-digit days, because most likely the reason they've been sitting there is because they've been doing a ton of both vertical and horizontal movement amongst the enterprise. They're looking at everything. And if they're spending that much time, there's something worthwhile there for them to wait and execute on. And so, look, scary, yes, but it's about having the right tools. It's about having the right rigor, like we mentioned. But I wouldn't get as hung up. A lot of people get hung up on the dwell days. It doesn't really matter, because when the bad news hits, yeah, you may want to do forensics, and you're probably going to figure out how long they were in there, and that will determine what you have to reach back for to restore a resilient enterprise, or at least get the minimum viable company back up and running. But
Yeah.
that's not going to change the sheer anomaly that exists and the all hands on deck maneuver that has to take place, right? Once that happens.
Because another term that kind of floats the internet is the whole minutes to meltdown. What is that about then?
Well, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, the only way I look at this both in our personal lives and our professional lives, it's tough to really instill or have a realization of how rough one of these can be if you don't actually simulate it and actually dig a little into the psyche of, this is day's going great. Immediately the day looks a little astable, and it's not just a little astable, your entire enterprise is going to go down. So when we do these minutes to meltdown, what we're trying to instill in an hour, that we try to keep them concise. We give small group tables. They each take a role on. So CISO, CIO, CTO, general counsel, etc. And it is amazing when you ask those folks, even if those are not the actual people at the table, to play those roles and say, do you know what your job is? Do you know what the call is? Oh, whoops, the CISO's out on a cruise and not available. Who's that backup? Who has the authority? Who has access to certain things that should be done? So as you start rolling all of this out, it is amazing. I don't want to say the terror, but let's use that for excitement. All of a sudden you see the faces going, we have not really discussed any of this. We have not prepared for these type of questions. And these aren't the difficult ones, right? We're not talking yet about restoring systems and actually bringing bits back online. We're just talking about what is the right escalation, who's responsible, who takes the ball, what are the out-of-band communication methods. So we try to hit on all of that on Minutes to Meltdown and make sure that when folks leave, the takeaways when they go back to the enterprise is usually we hear a couple things. Number one, we need to do this with the C-suite in the room.
Mhm.
Because if we had challenges answering some of these things and we're the ones expected to understand the detail, I don't think, at least they say with a nice voice, I don't think our executive team may understand all the different roles and responsibilities. And therefore, they need to get communicated downstream to the folks like us who are actually running the enterprise from an IT perspective. So anyway, it's an interesting thing. It's fun. It's also a little nerve-wracking, but that's what you want from the day. You want people leaving going, we need to make some change, some positive change.
As I was researching this particular topic on ransomware thing as well, because obviously AI, cloud, all of these are top of mind for a lot of people.
Yeah.
One of the things that I came across was the whole notion of, at least that was the first thought of the first question as well, where most people just believe that, hey, I have a backup that is offsite, so I should be fine in case I was impacted by ransomware. And most people also think ransomware is only on data centers, but it happens in cloud and other places as well. And a lot of people rely on their recovery. But I was told, and at least in the research that I did, these days, a lot of people keep restoring from a dirty data that they, without even realizing, they're backing up dirty data. Can you share a bit about that as well, as to what do you see there?
Yeah, not to mention another thing we do, but I just in passing, we do another version of this called Recovery Range, and in that it's a real live scenario. So unlike Minutes to Meltdown, which is really just exposing what we just spoke about, like who's in charge, how do things have to go, what are the order of events, we actually put people through a real-time, non-simulated event. But to short circuit to where, your question, you look at that and they make a decision in that simulation or that real life scenario in this overall simulation, if you will, and say, I'm going to choose a backup restore. I'm going to choose a restore point. And invariably, of course, that restore point's dirty. It still has code fragments that the bad actors can use to move both horizontally and vertically within the enterprise.
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't know that, but when they see it in real time, they actually do the restore. They go up, the website's up. This is incredible. We're back online selling whatever we're selling, or, helping people, or whatever it is the fictitious company does, only to see it reinfected within seconds later. Drills that point home. Now,
Mm.
there are some actors who will do that, as you could imagine, and not do it seconds later. They'll give you even a falser sense of security and hold off, which is even more challenging. So you have to combine that with appropriate forensics, and you need a place to do that restore in a penalty-free environment, because if you don't have a penalty-free environment, how do you really do appropriate forensics on where to bring the enterprise back up, right? Yeah.
I mean, so I'm glad you shared this as well, because I think the two workshops that we've been talking about, the minutes to meltdown and the recovery one as well, I feel a lot of leaders need to kind of simulate this with their board. I mean, they can go with you and other people as well, but they
Yep.
probably should think about doing this themselves, because to what you said, a lot of people don't even realize the responsibility they have when things go bad. And then,
Mhm.
this is making me even think, how do you even know when data is clean? Like, clean recovery, is that a word as well? Like, I mean, there's dirty data, but is there clean recovery as well?
Yeah, I mean, it is. In fact, there's some new terms. We won't mention the names, but as you can imagine, all of the analysts are always looking for a new, clean, resilient recovery, or some to throw a T in there, maybe an R, give me another vowel. Geez, I don't know. Let's just try them all. It doesn't matter what term you'd want to use. To your point, if I don't have a plan from beginning to end for full, clean, resilient recovery, or some would say, well, the clean's superfluous because a resilient recovery should mean that implicitly, whatever you'd like to choose.
Yeah.
That is the plan that needs to be executed on, and you need the right tools. But before you even get to the tools, because I think we'll probably chat about this, but the over tooling and everything else, my goodness, that's a whole other topic. But before you get to the tooling, you hit on it just a second ago. Who's who in the zoo, if you will? Who has the responsibilities? What are the backups? And it's really amazing that even some of the fundamental pieces that have to exist, like we were running one of these, it was a tabletop, right? The tabletops are fantastic. Again, something you need to do for lots of different parts of the enterprise. And somebody said, well, where's our recovery plan? And they're like, well, that's a no-brainer. We keep the recovery plan on Dropbox or Box or OneDrive. They're like, you do? You mean the one that just got corrupted? That's where that's the copy? No, don't worry about it. I keep it in two completely different directories. Sounds great. Keep it in 5. If they're all encrypted, you're not getting a copy of it. And so it's simple things. Even, I don't want to say little, because the recovery plan is not little, but not having a version that's immutable and somewhere that is going to be clean is going to cause a jumpstart problem right from the beginning. So just one little example of all of the details that need to be knocked out when you're thinking about one of these resilient recoveries, just jumpstarting it.
And do you find that is this where the barrier maybe comes in between how a CIO or a CEO thinks about recovery? And I guess because for a lot of people just assume they're happy to take the risk, because everyone just assumes someone would take care of the backup, someone is testing the backup.
Right.
Is that where it gets lost? And that's where the barrier for resiliency comes in? Because I almost feel like for a regulated company, it is kind of like a default. They would have a backup. Recovery, I don't know how many tested, but they're definitely a backup in most places. And that's kind of
Right.
where the whole, hey, I mean, I've got backup, I should be fine. Is that where the resilience comes in as well or is that where the barriers are for a CIO or a CISO or a legal team to be able to work in this world?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the legal team. You did it. You used the L word. And we're going to talk about that, because to your point, if you were to interview different individuals in isolation,
Yeah.
there's varying degrees of where they think they are. I mean, it's very possible, for your example, the CIO says, are you kidding me? Solid recovery plan. We understand how far back we take snaps. We understand immutable. We've got this. Let's assume they've even got, and they tested it. Have they vetted all of those plans with general counsel, with sales, right? With operations, teams beyond IT? And you hit on a magical point. If you don't have the appropriate coordination across all of the businesses, What IT may feel is viable recovery or resilient recovery could differ from what other executives running various parts of the company could feel is a resilient recovery. Now, everybody's probably going to feel their part of the business is the most important to bring up first. But clearly there's somebody who sits at the top of the pyramid who gets to make that call and make the decision as to which pieces come up. And I think that's another big, I'll make a small tangent here, is that if you don't have those priorities set out and well understood by everybody, right? You have two challenges. You're maybe overreaching on your minimal viable resilience that you're aiming for. And that only leads to frustration and a team that's already going to be highly exerted when one of these events come up. In fact, we have an interesting panel coming up at our client event in November where we're tackling the three major components that happen during any of these attacks, right? You've got tools, you've got process, and you have people. And they are all critically important, right? The people piece is probably one of the most underlooked. But you can imagine people already are in a stressed mode in one of these resilience recovery mechanisms. Can you imagine if you're overshooting what the CIO really, or I should say the CEO really wants for minimum recovery? That doesn't mean you're not going to have to do it all. But if you're trying to do too much with a team that's already going to be stressed, tired, et cetera, that's where you need to tighten down those minimum parameters. And so that's something we focus with clients on a great deal as well.
Oh, I think the whole legal thing also reminded me of when I was a CISO. One of the things that I came across was cybersecurity insurance and the coverage for it. How it relies on the fact that how much backup you have, and well, there's an assumption made. Someone in legal or accounting or somewhere else, not the CISO, someone else is basically filling out the form for insurance,
right,
for cybersecurity insurance. And I think the email that you get as a CISO is that, hey, by the way, do we do backups? Oh, yeah, good. Okay, then they move on and like, yeah, we cover backup for everything. Right. And you get a cybersecurity insurance for, I don't know, if your assets are worth $40 million, the insurance coverage is only for 10 million because no one wanted to pay the extra premium or whatever for the service. Like, no, it's only 10 million, George. Don't worry about this. Like, because someone thought it'd be more cost efficient. And because that made me, I smiled as I said that because you were using the word minimum viable recovery.
Yeah.
And that to me was like, wait, is that what you mean by minimal viable recovery? Or what do you mean by minimum viable recovery? And how do people define that?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think that's something you have to work with. Everybody's different, right? I mean, we could even stay in the same vertical.
Yeah.
Distribution, manufacturing distribution. And we could probably line 10 reasonably sized manufacturing distribution companies up. And of course, depending on what they do, what leadership wants, that minimal viable resilience recovery point, whatever that is on their spectrum, you're going to find some similarities and you'd be like, wow, there's some big differences. But that's okay. Maybe the board or the CEO has particular areas that they're like, we can live without this for a little while. We cannot live for more than a day here. And of course, putting numbers on that in general is difficult enough. Wrangling the T's and C's of cyber insurance, which I'm no cyber insurance super expert, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So that alone makes me qualified to answer this. The fact is, you have to be concerned about just not the number, but do you actually understand the loss and the loss rate for those particular pieces that would be down? And you'd say, well, Chris, I'm assuming you're doing that if you're signing up for the insurance and you're asking for a premium that's going to execute set amount of coverage, you would know that, but you'd be amazed. And so just like probably in our personal lives, you can overinsure or you can underinsure.
Yeah.
But as an overall topic, as you know, you opened a big can here. There's a lot of folks saying, I don't even know if this is worth it anymore. And that's, I know, beyond the scope of where you and I are going to go today, but we could tear out on a whole 2-hour call there. Is it even worth it? There are definitely companies starting to scratch their head and ask themselves whether cyber insurance will exist, period, for them. Makes sense. Or is this entire industry going to have to change somewhat because the premiums are getting insane and the terms and conditions to get them out of pain are beyond insane if you talk to
Yeah,
most
I think
people these days?
the only reason I brought that up is because a lot of people look at ransomware or being impacted by a security incident. They always look at two things. One is I have a backup I can recover, which we clearly kind of spoke about the fact that there are blind spots there as well. And the other part they look at is cybersecurity insurance. And I think that's kind of where I was coming from as well, where I wonder now that both foundational pillars of what we used to think makes us resilient, how should people reimagine resiliency is, and how should they apply that into the strategy? We're towards the tail end of 2025 now. A lot of people will be planning ahead for 2026 now.
Mm-hmm.
What should strategies in 2026 from a cybersecurity perspective think from a resiliency perspective? And I'm going to use the word that you said earlier, from a healthy or from a clean recovery, if another word
Yeah.
from the analyst over there.
Yep.
What should those considerations be, and how can they kind of stage it in terms of what are some of the initial milestones they can look at?
It's a good question because it's a little overwhelming, right? I mean, I'll go back to a moment ago. I mentioned this panel we have coming up on tools, process, people. And you think
Yeah.
about how big of a sphere that is to try to wrap your arms around all three of those because each of them are so deep, right? But let me start at least at the tool side. Every year, probably for more than a decade, I'd have to go back. I mean, it's tough. You get to my age, Ashish, you get the little red scooter driving around. Sometimes you forget things. I mean, it's tough out there. We say, look at your tools, take inventory of what you have. It is flabbergasting to me the amount that is either still on the shelf, non-implemented, implemented, but if you get people alone, they'll admit poorly implemented or almost implemented to the point where it provides no particular value because it's not hooked in with the rest of the tool set. And then you have converging AI. And of course, so many per day, it seems, new SaaS-based solutions that nobody could even track them, even if you had a dedicated W2 body watching them every day. So my first comment would be on the tool side. Take inventory. And if AI, whatever pace your AI strategy is at, you have to look at that from two sides. You have to look at it from the side of what are the tools that you are looking to implement, that your C-suite is looking to implement to make things easier, to drive revenue and profitability and all the amazing things that AI promises. Then you have to think of AI, unfortunately, from the lens of the bad actors. And that doesn't mean you need to be an expert in understanding how they do everything, but you have to admit, and I like to use the mirror approach here. If you're excited about the things you're doing from an AI perspective and tools at your enterprise, imagine if you're in mom's basement, having a snack, doing nefarious things, and all you're doing is going, how can I use this incredible AI to my advantage? And you do have to put yourself in the slippers, if you will, of that side. So you've got to look at the AI piece, I feel, from both sides. That said, summarizing, tool inventory. And you can't be afraid to throw out which you're not using or has been poorly implemented. I know that is easy to say. And I know I see it. I see it when I have conversations with CISOs. They'll admit what's on the shelf for poorly implemented. And you say, well, have you dumped it? And that's the harder conversation, but you have to have it. So I won't keep beating on that drum. You have to have that. And again, take the middle point, the process piece. Even after I've done the tool selection, do I know who is going to be at this tip of the spear for these tools? Am I communicating between legal, operations, and core IT and anyone else that I could be leaving out? And am I gluing that together? And do I have the right talent, right? Do I have the right people? I know this is a tough environment, but I mean, we're recording this almost October 1st, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is, fourth quarter of the calendar year. It is a employer's market right now, at least on a macro side, which means if I can put my, employer shoes on for a moment, I have access to great talent. This is a great time to take assessment, just like you're doing on the tools side, on the people side. And I know some will go like, wow, this is the same stuff we've been talking about for 10 years. And I say this a little tongue in cheek. Well, you may be talking about it for 10 years, but talking about it and doing it are two different things. So if there's a time to get cracking for 2026 before Santa comes down the chimney, take these 3 months, put a tiger team on it and start working through these with the partner of your choice, one step at a time,
Yeah. And do you find that, I mean, I guess I'm glad you mentioned AI as well, because I think, does the whole world of backup and recovery change with AI in terms of, obviously, you mentioned people, process, technology. What other impacts is it having? Because obviously now there are regulatories coming as well. There's a DORA, NIS2, where you can't, I think the wording is that ransomware payments would be considered illegal, or like
right?
in terms of, there are quite a few regulations coming up in this space as well. I mean, so with AI or without AI, how is this kind of space evolving?
Yeah, if I can, that's the double loaded barrel question right there. Because the one part goes back to our discussion of insurance, right?
Yep.
So should I even have this? Oh, a lot of these insurances won't even pay if it's actual ransom or if you decide to pay the ransom. But we see statistics that people pay it anyway because they're so desperate in the customer sentiment, especially if you're a public company.
Oh,
Private's one
wow.
thing, still bad. Public,
Yeah.
whole other level of issue, right? When that happens. So, to your point, should you be paying it? Depends on your insurance, depends on, of course, the C-suite. So that's a whole topic in and of itself. On the AI side, how do you back things up? When we talk to clients who are just dabbling, just beginning, I don't think, this is a general statement, that you have to be overly concerned. If you're using, let's say, a public model like Llama, right? And you're like, look, it's good enough for what we're initially doing. We're going to bring it in-house and we're going to experiment with the weights. Well, if you're using a public model that may be massive, you may not need to back that up initially. You may need to critically back up and encrypt, of course, and have indelible copies of your weights. And, I know we're not going to go deep here into AI, but those weights are magic. That is
Yeah.
where you're tweaking things in that model for your specific enterprise to get value out of the model. So if you spend on W-2 alone, let alone all the other costs, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on just the right people who are doing that work, you better make sure you're protecting it appropriately. Now, that's one side of it. There are people making custom models, and we talk about this. Imagine the classic actor getting inside and causing an event in your enterprise. And they take a classic RDBMS database, they exfiltrate it using some type of, looks like HTTPS. They trickle it out. They do it the old-fashioned way. I say old-fashioned, still pretty high-tech stuff, but compared to AI, right? If you are building an AI model at the enterprise level that mashes up all of the operational databases that you have with customer data, all confidential internal data, your own financials, can you imagine a supply chain? You now a bad actor doesn't even have to go and worry about all of these diversified things that they used to. If they're smart enough to figure out you have a monolithic model, what a breakthrough. If they can exfiltrate that and query it, they're like, this job is so easy now. I don't even have to go figure out how to go attack the database and then set up appropriate queries and figure out how they structured their data. Why? I could just use English. And even if English isn't my primary language, who cares? I use whatever language I want and extract the data. So that is just something those more advanced enterprises who are looking at AI need to think about protecting those models. We have ways to do that. We have an enormous amount of development, as you can imagine, as do I think all our peers, on making sure we can back those models up. We'd like to think we're at the forefront of that, but it's very specific to where you are in that kind of AI journey. And those are conversations we have every time now, asking, where are you today? Where do you think you'll be in the medium term? And where does your C-suite want to go long term, so we can make sure we're appropriately planning for being as resilient as humanly possible with these type of AI directions and architectural decisions, you're making.
Should the resilient architecture or the way people think of resiliency should change as well? Because I think from based on what we've spoken about so far, the way we have defined resiliency so far has been more for the, I'm going to say quote unquote traditional world, not for the world we're moving into, where, to your point, now it's a simple English is enough for someone to take your data out. Should resiliency be thought about in a different way? Like how people should imagine resiliency to be in 2026?
Yeah. So you bring up an interesting point, because I'll give you an example. We're, of course, talking about somebody buried in deep, causing incredible problems, whole enterprises down, right? I mean, bad, worst case scenario type of thing.
Yeah.
But okay, that could happen and you need to be protected. But there are things that folks are doing that are just, I'd call them extensions. I'll probably get a bunch of phone calls after this, but that are extensions of classic problems. Look, when APIs became highly prevalent. When APIs became highly prevalent, people are like, this is incredible. I don't have to almost do anything anymore. I can talk to anybody. I can use secure APIs, my supply chain, my partners. Sure, until people exploited APIs, right?
Yep.
No different now, as we are exposing these models externally to general public, right? And you'd say, well, Chris, nobody's going to expose a model and just fence the type of queries that can be done. But they're not going to have the real model in the back, right? That if it's poisoned or there's some type of nefarious execution through API, that they're going to get data that's normally restricted. They could. And so now, some of that's beyond the scope, for example, of what we do. But important to your question, these are the things that need to be done. And this is sometimes a different level of talent. It may be taking your security and software development teams that have forged a decade plus of understanding how to protect classic APIs and now take that and up-level them to be able to do that for the querying for their LLMs that they're building.
Yeah.
You need to do that. And of course, this just means more rigor in the software development process, very talented people with unique skills. And I do believe, I feel good that most enterprises have, larger ones, have people that can up-level themselves. But if this is something you're taking seriously and you don't think you have it in-house, you got to find a way to build it. You got to find a way to start doing that right now, especially if you're on an aggressive path that a board is pushing, whether you're private or public. It's just happening too quick. Back to our earlier conversation about just the speed of everything occurring. So, yeah.
Do you feel boards should have a ransomware tabletop exercise as well?
Would love that. Now, I'll say two things. We would love that. And anybody would, because it immediately exposes them to, wow. But then, of course, I'm sure, kind of kidding here, but then as soon as they get out, this poor executive team who already gets handed a bunch of to-dos from the board goes, great, they did a tabletop. And now they come back and they have a 400-page PowerPoint on all the things they'd like to see because they got scared in the tabletop. I do think if it happens, the way it should probably happen is have your C-suite or executive-ish team, however you want to put that together, do the tabletop. Get a little scared. That's okay. Put a plan in place working with your partners, right? And your manufacturer partners, your integrator partners, and then have the board do that. And you may not catch everything, but you're at least, let's shoot for the 80-20 rule. And maybe we take that monster PowerPoint down to 3 pages instead of a 30 blaster. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, fair. I mean, after listening to this, if someone actually does get their board to have a tabletop exercise, I would definitely love to hear from them as well. As to how that went.
Now, if you're looking to drive excitement and heart medication, then send the board in first before anybody else.
Or if they still have a job after all that, because I imagine every time I proposed it was almost like, are you crazy? Why would you do that?
Yeah, they're like, no, we're not doing that because and then the stuff. No. But it's okay. I mean, kidding aside, the board is there to be the overwatch for the executive team. But I do think that you don't need to do 6 of these. I understand these folks. That's another thing I hear. Oh, they're so busy. We can't get them to do that. We can't get them to do that. Look, I'm not saying you don't plan it and you don't optimize it and you make sure that it's not too long of a day. You're not there to have sleeping bags and have them there for 3 days. You're there to have them for a reasonably compressed window to understand the touch points that haven't been connected and to understand their people and where the gaps are. And it's okay that the first one may be rough. And I think there's sometimes this concern of, oh, I'm going to get a lot of to-dos. Maybe, but would you rather have that and be ready for that anomaly when the dwell time turns into surprise time? I think you'd rather you'd rather have the latter where you're like, we're ready for this. We prepared.
I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, because that's all the technical questions I had. I do have three fun questions for you as well.
Yeah.
First one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not trying to help save the world from all the ransomware and dirty recovery or dirty data?
You mean, what else am I chatting with clients about?
I mean, it could be professional, could be personal. That is up to you.
Well, it is interesting. Drones are a big hobby of mine, both aerial photography and those speedy ones that people race. And it's interesting because there are some bridges there as you look at the capabilities that different customers are using in that space. And imagine we haven't even tackled what are the ramifications of somebody getting access to early data for these folks that are experimenting with drone deliveries or agricultural reconnaissance or other types of mapping. These all come to, what is Gartner calling it now? Cyber physical systems, CPS, the cool kid term for 2026. Don't leave it out of your vocabulary. There's a hype curve and everything. But I mean, there's a lot of reality to this. Where autonomous systems are connected with the physical world, we have to have a keen eye to. So, of course, we all hear about this day to day of, the autonomous vehicles and, oh my goodness, the whole world of non-driving cars. We understand that because we've either been in a Waymo or we see what Tesla's doing. It's coming. But it's not restricted just to vehicles. It's not restricted just to aerial drones. There are many touch points. So I'd say for those unique clients, and I look at this because I just have a hobby space in this area, look beyond the standard box boundaries, right? And this should be organically coming out of a client conversation. I love to have these where I'm like, what are your leading edge things that you're doing, even if they're 2 or 3 years out? Because while the tool may not exist, that doesn't mean we can't start thinking about an appropriate encryption, resilience plan, and how we're going to weave that into your overall architecture. So I like taking sort of some hobby areas and weaving them into stories where enterprises may touch it directly or be tangential, but I find it useful. There you have it.
That's a great answer. I've got my second question, which is, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media?
I would say my relatively inadequate guitar playing, but that's not a good answer because I'm not in a band. And imagine that would be the life I'd want to, I'd want to live. But I do enjoy music, and if I could do it all over again, Ashish, that's what it would be. I mean, you and I would just be singing the hits for an hour, and I got to tell you, that's Mr. Beast kind of numbers. If we can get that to happen, we're popping 20, 30 million on this thing. Okay, no brainer.
I can imagine. I mean, music does have that capability to go beyond just the technology of it as well. So
you know something. This is just an idea. I'm not saying you don't. It's for free. You take the same. We start doing these as a full, like, what do I want to say? New York
live
musical. This is something people can get behind, right? So it's going to take a little more planning and some songwriting, but I think it could be worth it. Just
now we have AI to write the songs as well. It can rap. It can do more things as well. So
anything you want.
Not far from what can be achieved.
That's true. You know what? Now, in fact, funny you say that. We had our CMO Anna. She's amazing. She said, I want to see the teams break into groups, write a little rap, have some fun using AI. I'm going to tell you, there were some lyrics popping out of the old Chat GPT that were fantastic in the Commvault space and Resiliency. It was incredibly creative with both the people piece, what they did, and what the AI did. I know it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it was great. But it was fun to see what this stuff is all doing and people experimenting how they can have fun with it and still deliver a message, right? Still deliver a message.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is possible. So now thank you for sharing that as well. Final
Yeah.
question. What is your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share with us?
Oh, easy peasy. If I could live one place, it would be Tokyo. And if you're like, you only get one food for the rest of your life, it's sushi. And if you told me to share all the pins I have in downtown Tokyo, we'd be here for another hour. But let's just say that metro, lock me in there, put a fence around it. I'm a happy camper. I'm also pushing possibly 350 if you leave me there for too long. So you better pull me out before it gets too
No, I mean, that's definitely a great choice as well. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for the answers as well.
Yeah, you're
Where can
welcome.
people connect with you to know more about the work that you are doing with obviously the recovery work, the ransomware work, Commvault, and all of that? Where can people connect with you on this to get some more information?
Yeah, well, you can connect on LinkedIn. I'm guessing you'll share that. My email, you can email me directly, no problem, and would love that. And again, it's a conversation. You start where you have to start, and that's different for everybody. And you move at the pace that's appropriate with just a nominal foot on the gas to make sure that you see it through. I think that's the one thing I'd like to end on. If you look back, you and I have seen this over decades. You can start a lot of things. Same thing personally. You have to finish it, or at least you have to finish it to where it's providing value. And in this case, being resilient, you have to finish it. So
well, okay, great note to end on as well. Thank you so much for sharing this, and I'll put the LinkedIn link into the show notes as well. But thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for doing the interview, and thank you everyone for tuning in as well. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening or watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. This was brought to you by techriot.io. If you are enjoying episodes on cloud security, you can find more episodes like these on cloudsecuritypodcast.tv, our website, or on social media platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn, and Apple Spotify. In case you are interested in learning about AI security as well, do check out our sister podcast called AI Security Podcast, which is available on YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple as well, where we talk to other CISOs and practitioners about what's the latest in the world of AI security. Finally, if you're after a newsletter, it just gives you top news and insight from all the experts we talk to at Cloud Security Podcast. You can check that out on cloudsecurity.newsletter.com. I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.